Now that we know how to generate JSON web tokens and securely store our secret key, the next step is to learn how to validate tokens. Whenever a client sends a request to a protected endpoint, we need to check if the token they're sending is real, unmodified, and not expired. So in this lesson, I'm going to show you how to parse and validate a JSON web token. So here in Auth Controller, we're going to expose a new endpoint for validating tokens. Now, this is just a temporary solution. In real-world applications, we don't need to expose an endpoint for validating tokens. Instead, we should validate tokens on every request. We'll talk about that later in this section. So let's define a new method. Public, Boolean, validate. We pass the token. Now we're going to pass the token using the authorization header. That's the standard HTTP header for passing credentials. So we should annotate this with request header, and as an argument, we pass authorization. Next, we annotate this with post mapping and expose it at this endpoint. Now, we are not going to implement the validation logic here because that's not the responsibility of the controller. We should implement it in our service. So we go to our JWT service and define a new method for validating tokens. So public, Boolean, validate token. In this method, we call JWTs.parser. This returns a builder for creating a JWT parser. So we call this. Next, we call verify with, complete the code. So with this, we're passing our secret key. This is the same expression we had for generating a token. Okay. So we specify the key we're going to use for validating the token. Next, we call build. This returns a JWT parser. Next, we call parse signed claims. And here we pass the token. Once we parse the token, then we call get payload to get the payload. So we get the payload and store it in an object. Now we call this claims. Claims are properties we know about a token, like the subject, issued at, and expiration. So we get the claims. Now, claims is essentially a map. If you hold down Command on Mac or Control on Windows and click var, you can see the definition of the claims interface. So this interface extends the map interface. Here we have the standard claims in JSON web tokens like issuer, subject, audience, expiration, and so on. We also have methods for getting these claims, like get subject for getting the email or user ID, get expiration, and so on. So we parse the token and get the payload. Now, if the token is invalid, this statement is going to throw an exception. So we should wrap this inside a try catch block. We select this piece of code and move it up here. Then we add our catch clause. The exception we want to catch is JWT exception. If we catch any exceptions, that means the token is invalid, so we return false. Otherwise, if we have a valid token, we want to make sure that it's not expired. So we call claims.getExpiration. This returns a data object. So if this is after the current date time, that means the token is valid. So then we return the result. Okay. Now, if the methods I have used in this video are not available on your machine, that's because you're using a different version of the JWT library. Unfortunately, there have been a number of API changes in this library over years. So for reference, make sure you're using JJWT implementation version 0.12.6, JJWT Jackson version 0.12.5, and JJWT API version 0.12.6. So we're done with the validation of our token. Now, back to Auth Controller. Here we call JWT service.validate token and return the result. Now, this endpoint is protected by default, so we have to go to our security config and permit requests to this endpoint. So I'm going to duplicate this line and allow post requests to auth/validate. Let's restart the application. I'm going to hit the login endpoint one more time to get a new token. Now, let's copy this. We open a new tab to send a post request to localhost/auth/validate. Then we include the token in the headers. So here we add a new header That's authorization. You paste the token and send the request. You get a 200 response and the token is valid. But if we modify this, I'm going to add an exclamation mark at the beginning. Let's send the request. Now the token is invalid. So this is how we can validate tokens. Now, when sending a JSON web token in the authorization header, we should prefix the token with bearer followed by a space. This is a standard we have to follow in REST APIs. So now if we send this request, obviously our token is invalid. So we have to modify our controller to extract the token from this string. Back to the auth controller. First, I want to rename this parameter from token to auth header. Now there are two ways we can extract the token. One way a lot of people use is auth header. They call substring and pass 7. So this skips the first 7 characters, which is bearer followed by a space. These are 7 characters. So if we call substring and pass 7, then we'll get the token and we can pass it to our validate method. That's one way, but passing 7 here is kind of like a magic number. So the way I like to extract token is like this. Instead, we call replace bearer with an empty string. Note that here we should also include a white space. Okay. Now let's restart the application and make sure our token is valid. Okay, our token is valid. Great. Now you might be wondering why I'm extracting the token inside the controller and not inside the service. Because our service expects a token and not an authorization header. So at this layer inside the controller, we're still working with a request header. So this is the right place to extract the token and pass to our JWT service. So we're done with this lesson. Now, as I told you earlier, we don't want to validate tokens using this endpoint. Instead, we want Spring Security to take care of this automatically every time we receive a request. The way we do that is by adding a filter. We'll talk about filters next.